Jack wiped the sweat from his forehead as he stared at the blinking panel. The air recycler was acting up again, and as the only maintenance engineer awake on the night cycle, it was his job to fix it. He checked his map tablet and frowned. The layout of the Vespid Palace made no sense to human eyes. "Just find junction box C12, he muttered to himself. How hard can it be? Very hard, as it turned out. The Vespid Palace was built like a hive, all curved walls, and identical hallways that branched in 6 directions instead of 4. Jack had been wandering for 20 minutes, and the diplomatic quarters were nowhere in sight. Tomorrow was the big day, the first official meeting between humans and the Vespid Collective. Captain Hayes had been clear. Don't mess this up. The Vespids were powerful, organized, and not known for their patience with other species. Jack turned down another hallway that looked promising. The walls here were different, shinier, with strange patterns that seemed to glow faintly. He didn't remember seeing this on the approved tour. "I'm definitely not supposed to be here," he whispered. As he turned to go back, a breeze caught his attention. That was odd. Most of the palace was still air. Air movement meant ventilation, and ventilation could lead him back to the recycler he needed to fix. Jack followed the breeze to a narrow passage. It was small, probably meant for the worker Vespids who were half the size of humans. He had to crouch to enter it. The passage twisted and turned, sloping gently downward. Jack noticed small gaps in the walls that looked like sensor arrays. He ducked under one instinctively as it emitted a faint red beam. Years of crawling through tight maintenance shafts on ships had given him good instincts for avoiding things that might zap him. After several minutes of uncomfortable crawling, the passage widened into a small chamber with 3 identical doors. Jack pulled out his tablet, but it showed nothing useful, just a blinking signal lost message. "Great," he sighed. "Eeny, meeny, miny, mo." He picked the middle door and stepped through into brightness. The chamber he entered was like nothing he'd ever seen. The ceiling soared at least 30 feet high, with crystal formations hanging down that caught the light and scattered it in rainbow patterns across the floor. The walls were lined with what looked like living plants that pulsed with soft light. In the center of the room was a raised platform surrounded by pools of shimmering liquid that gave off a sweet smell. And on the platform was the largest Vespid Jack had ever seen. She, it was definitely a she, was nearly twice the size of the other Vespids Jack had glimpsed during the arrival ceremony. Her exoskeleton wasn't the dull brown of the guards, but a brilliant blue-green that shifted colors as she moved. 6 delicate wings folded along her back, translucent and patterned with complex designs. Her compound eyes fixed on Jack, and he felt frozen in place. This was no ordinary Vespid. This had to be the queen. Jack's mind raced through the briefing he'd received. No human had ever seen the Vespid queen. She never appeared in public. Her chambers were supposed to be the most heavily guarded place in the entire collective. And he had just stumbled into them. The queen rose to her full height, towering over Jack. Her mandibles clicked in what might have been surprise or anger. Jack knew he should run, but his legs wouldn't move. His training hadn't covered this situation. The queen's head tilted slightly as she regarded him. Then, in perfect English, she spoke. "Well," she said, her voice surprisingly melodic, "this is unexpected." Jack opened his mouth, but no words came out. For perhaps the first time in his life, a human was left completely speechless. Seconds passed like hours as Jack stood frozen before the massive Vespid queen. His mind screamed at him to bow, to run, to do something, but his body refused to move. The queen stepped closer, her movements fluid and graceful despite her size. The sweet scent in the room grew stronger. "You are from the human delegation," she stated. It wasn't a question. Jack finally managed to nod. "Ah, yes, Your Majesty. I'm Jack. I'm the maintenance engineer for our ship." His voice came out steadier than he expected. "I got lost trying to fix an air recycler, and I took a wrong turn. Many wrong turns, actually." He waited for her to call guards, to have him dragged away for daring to enter her private chambers. Instead, the Queen made a sound that Jack realized was laughter, and musical trilling that echoed off the crystal ceiling. "Fascinating," she said. "My security system has stopped 12 assassination attempts in the last cycle. It has repelled the finest spies from the Duraxian Empire. Yet you, a human maintenance engineer, walked right through it because you were looking for an air recycler." Jack swallowed hard. "I'm really sorry about that." The Queen circled him slowly, her compound eyes taking in every detail. Jack noticed her wings shimmered with patterns that seemed to shift and change with her mood. "Do not apologize for accomplishing what others could not," she said, "though perhaps it would be wise not to mention your achievement to my security chief." Jack let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. "That seems sensible, Your Majesty." The Queen gestured to a low platform near her own. "Sit, human Jack. Since you are here, we might as well talk. I have been curious about your species." Jack carefully sat on the offered seat, which was surprisingly comfortable despite looking like it was made of the same hard material as the walls. "I'm not really supposed to be here," he said honestly. "I'm not a diplomat. Captain Hayes would probably have a heart attack if she knew." "All the better," the Queen replied. "Diplomats are trained to say what others wish to hear. I prefer honest words from a common worker." She settled back onto her own platform. "Tell me about your role on your ship. You fix things that break." Jack nodded. "I keep all the systems running. Air, water, power. If something stops working, I figure out why and make it work again. And if you cannot fix it, then I find a workaround. There's always a way to solve a problem. Maybe not the perfect way, but some way to keep things going until a better solution comes along." The Queen's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. "Interesting. In Vespid society, each is born to a single purpose. A worker cannot become a warrior. A warrior cannot become an engineer. Each serves the role they were created for." "That sounds limiting," Jack said, then immediately worried he'd offended her. But the Queen only tilted her head. "Indeed, it is efficient, but perhaps too rigid. Your human adaptability intrigues me. Our records indicate your kind has only achieved space travel recently, yet you spread quickly through your sector." Jack smiled. "We're good at figuring things out as we go along. Like finding your way into my chambers." "That was pure luck," Jack admitted. "And being the right size to miss some of your sensors, I think." The Queen's wings fluttered slightly. "Not luck, Jack. Humans make their own paths. My advisors warned me of this trait. They see it as dangerous, unpredictable." Jack met her gaze. "And what do you think, Your Majesty?" Before she could answer, a sharp buzzing sound filled the room. The Queen's posture changed instantly, her wings stiffening as she rose. "The diplomatic meeting," she said, her voice suddenly harder. "Something is wrong." Jack stood too. "What's happening?" The Queen's eyes fixed on him with new intensity. "It seems, maintenance engineer Jack, that you may have a chance to demonstrate more of your human adaptability very soon." The Queen moved quickly to a glowing panel on the wall. She placed her hand against it, and the surface came alive with symbols Jack couldn't understand. Images appeared showing different parts of the palace. "What's happening?" Jack asked, moving closer despite his better judgment. "Rebellion," the Queen said, her voice sharp. "General Crix and his followers have seized the main hall where your diplomats are meeting with my council." Jack felt his heart race. "Are our people hurt?" "They are alive, but held hostage." The Queen's mandibles clicked rapidly in what Jack guessed was frustration. "Crix has long opposed any alliance with humans. He believes your kind will bring chaos to our ordered society." "He might not be wrong about the chaos part," Jack admitted, "but we don't mean any harm." The Queen turned to face him. "I know. That is why I agreed to these talks despite opposition." She hesitated, then added, "There is something you should know, Jack. Something few outside the royal lineage understand about our species." She gestured for him to follow her to the center of the room. There, A pool of shimmering blue liquid reflected their faces. "The Vespid Collective is more than just our name," she explained. "It is what we are. All Vespids are connected through a network of biological signals, what you might call pheromones. These signals maintain our social order and unity." Jack nodded slowly. "Like a hive mind?" "Not exactly. Each Vespid has individual thoughts, but our actions and loyalty are guided by these signals. And I," she touched her chest with one delicate limb, "am the source." Jack's eyes widened as understanding dawned. "You control everyone." "Control is too simple a word. I provide the framework for our society. Without these signals, our civilization would collapse into chaos. This is why the Queen is never seen, never leaves the palace. I must maintain the collective at all costs." "So why aren't you stopping this rebellion right now?" Jack asked. The Queen's wings drooped slightly. "General Crix has found a way to block my signals in the main hall. He and his closest followers wear devices that shield them from my influence. The rest of my people still follow me, but Crix holds the strategic position." Jack looked at the images on the screen. He could see Captain Hayes and the human delegation surrounded by armed Vespid guards. "There's something else," Jack said slowly, studying the Queen's posture. "Something you're not telling me." The Queen was silent for a moment. Then she spoke, her voice quieter than before. "I have been experimenting with giving my people more freedom, loosening the strength of certain guiding signals, allowing more independent thought." She looked directly at Jack. "Your human societies fascinate me. So chaotic, yet you create such wonders. Your art, your music, your technology, all born from individual minds working without a central guide." Jack began to understand. "And General Crix doesn't like these changes. He believes they will destroy us." Perhaps he is right. The Queen's compound eyes seemed to dim. 5,000 years of perfect order. Perhaps I am risking too much. Jack shook his head. "With respect, Your Majesty, order without growth is just standing still. Humans have made plenty of mistakes, but we learn from them. We change. We get better." "Is that truly possible? To change what you are at your core and survive?" Before Jack could answer, another alarm sounded, louder than before. The images on the screen changed to show armed Vespids moving through the palace corridors. "They are coming here," the Queen said. "Crix knows that if he eliminates me, he can install a new queen loyal to the old ways." Jack looked at the door he had entered through, then back at the Queen. "I may not be a diplomat or a soldier, but I'm pretty good at finding hidden paths. If you want to stop this revolt, I think I can help you get where you need to go." "There is a network of maintenance tunnels throughout the palace," the Queen said as she moved to a seemingly solid wall. She pressed her hand against it, and a section slid open. "Used by worker drones for repairs. They are too small for warriors, but perfect for a human maintenance engineer," Jack said with a smile. "Where do we need to go?" "The central pheromone chamber. From there, I can override the blocking devices Crix is using." She pointed to a glowing map that appeared on the wall. "Here, 3 levels down, at the heart of the palace." Jack studied the map, committing the route to memory. "What about my people? The human delegation?" The Queen's antennae twitched. "If I can regain control, your people will be safe. If not," she didn't finish the thought. "Then we better not fail," Jack said simply. He checked his tool belt. He still had his basic repair kit. Not much for fighting, but maybe useful in other ways. The Queen hesitated at the tunnel entrance. "I have never left my chambers through such means. I have rarely left them at all." Jack realized the gravity of what was happening. "Your Majesty, are you sure about this?" "Why trust me? I'm just a human you met minutes ago." The Queen's compound eyes fixed on him. "Because, Jack, you entered my chambers by accident, with no intention of harm. In 5,000 years of rule, that has never happened before. Perhaps it is a sign that change truly is necessary." With that, she folded her wings tight against her back and entered the tunnel. Jack followed, amazed at how she could compress her large form to fit the narrow space. The maintenance tunnels were a maze of tight passages, lit only by faint bioluminescent strips. Jack led the way, following the map in his head. Behind him, the Queen moved with surprising grace for her size. "Your people really built these small," Jack commented as they squeezed through a particularly narrow section. "Efficiency," the Queen replied. "Worker drones need little space. Why build larger than necessary? On human ships, we make maintenance tunnels big enough for any crew member to use. You never know who might need to access them in an emergency." "Another example of human adaptability," the Queen observed, preparing for the unexpected. A distant sound of metal against metal echoed through the tunnels. Jack froze, signaling the Queen to stop. "Guards," he whispered. The Queen's antennae vibrated. "Yes. 2 warriors searching the tunnels. They cannot sense me clearly through these walls. The material blocks pheromones. Can you order them to leave?" She shook her head. "Not without revealing my location. And they may be loyal to Crix." Jack thought quickly. Is there another route? No. This is the only path to the central chamber. Jack pulled a small device from his tool belt, a sonic screwdriver used for loosening stubborn bolts. "I have an idea. These tunnels carry sound well, right?" The Queen nodded. "And Vespid warriors have sensitive hearing to detect intruders." "Very sensitive," she confirmed. Jack grinned. "Then we're going to give them something to hear." He adjusted the screwdriver to its highest setting and handed it to the Queen. "When I give the signal, press this button and throw it down that side passage. Then we run. Fast." The Queen took the tool carefully. "What will it do?" "Make a noise that will have them running the other way. Trust me." Jack waited until he heard the guards getting closer. Then he nodded to the Queen. She pressed the button and threw the device. Immediately, a high-pitched wailing filled the tunnels, echoing and amplifying. "Now," Jack grabbed the Queen's arm without thinking and pulled her forward. They ran through the tunnels as the confused shouts of the guards faded behind them. The Queen's breathing was heavy, but she kept pace. "That was very human of you," she said between breaths. Jack smiled as they approached a large junction. "Thanks. I think that's a compliment." "It is," the Queen replied. "But our real challenge lies ahead. The central chamber will be heavily guarded." Jack paused at the junction, looking down at the steep drop that would take them to the lower level. "Then we'll just have to be even more human about it." The drop to the lower level was steep. Jack looked around and spotted maintenance rungs embedded in the wall of the shaft. "I can climb down this," he said, testing the first rung. "But what about you, Your Majesty?" The Queen's wings fluttered slightly. "My kind can control our descent." Without warning, she stepped into the open shaft. Instead of falling, she floated down slowly, her wings vibrating at an incredible speed. Jack watched in amazement. "That's handy," he said, beginning his own climb down. When they reached the bottom, Jack checked the passage ahead. "How far to the central chamber?" 200 meters through this main tunnel, but there will be guards at the entrance." Jack nodded, thinking, is there anything special about the central chamber? Why is it important? The Queen's antennae twitched. "It contains the primary pheromone amplifiers. My signals are naturally strong, but to reach throughout the palace and beyond, they must be amplified. From there, I can override any blocking technology Crix is using." "So it's basically a broadcasting station," Jack said, "with you as the transmitter." A simplification, but essentially correct. They moved carefully through the tunnel until they reached a bend. Jack peered around it and quickly pulled back. 4 guards, big ones, all armed. The Queen's mandibles clicked in frustration. Warriors, elite guards. They will not be easily distracted by noise. "Then we need another approach." Jack looked up at the ceiling of the tunnel, noticing a series of pipes running along it. "What are those?" "Ventilation ducts. They carry scented air throughout the palace, part of the pheromone distribution system. Jack grinned. Perfect. Can you climb? Minutes later, they were crawling through the ventilation system above the guards. The ducts were barely large enough for the queen, who had to flatten her body completely to fit. In 5,000 years, she whispered, no queen has ever done this. Making history, Jack replied. It's what humans do best. They passed directly over the guards and continued toward the central chamber. Through small vents, Jack could see they were approaching a large, circular room filled with strange, glowing equipment. The air here was thick with sweet-smelling particles that made Jack slightly dizzy. That's it, the queen whispered. The central chamber. Jack counted 6 more guards inside the room, plus 2 Vespids in different uniforms working at control panels. Technicians, the queen explained. They maintain the amplifiers. Are they loyal to you or Crix? Uncertain. Technicians are bred for intelligence. They think more independently than warriors. Jack studied the room layout, noting the positions of each guard and the main control panel in the center. I think I see a way to do this, but it's going to require perfect timing. He explained his plan quickly. The queen listened, her compound eyes widening. That is extremely risky, she said when he finished. That's how humans operate, Jack said with a shrug. High risk, high reward. If you fail, they will kill you instantly. Then I won't fail. Jack's voice was calm, confident. He unclipped his multi-tool from his belt. Ready? The queen seemed to study him for a long moment. You humans are remarkable creatures, facing impossible odds with such certainty. It's not certainty, Jack corrected her. It's hope. And sometimes, that's enough. With that, he removed a section of the vent and dropped into the room, landing behind a large piece of equipment. The guards didn't notice, their attention focused outward. Jack waited as the queen positioned herself above the center of the room. He gave her the signal. 3 quick taps on the metal pipe beside him. The queen burst through the ventilation shaft in an explosion of metal and dust. Her wings spread wide, glowing with brilliant blue light. Every Vespid in the room froze, their antennae straight up in shock. In that moment of distraction, Jack sprinted toward the control panel. 2 guards spotted him and raised their weapons, but they were too slow. Human speed and reflexes, evolved on a planet with higher gravity, gave Jack the edge he needed. Jack reached the control panel and immediately began pressing buttons. Following the queen's earlier instructions, the guards recovered from their shock and moved toward him, weapons raised. Stop, human, one shouted. The queen's voice rang out, powerful and commanding. Hold. Most of the guards froze instantly, their bodies responding to the queen's pheromones even as their minds struggled against them. But 2 guards wearing special helmets continued forward. These must have been fitted with Crix's blocking technology. Jack worked frantically at the panel. Almost there, Your Majesty. The queen hovered above them, her wings beating so fast they were nearly invisible. She released a cloud of glittering particles that filled the room. The warriors without helmets immediately dropped to their knees, overwhelmed by the direct exposure to royal pheromones. One of the helmet-wearing guards reached Jack and swung his weapon. Jack ducked, the blade missing his head by inches. He rolled away, putting distance between himself and the guard. The helmets, the queen called. They block my control. Jack noticed something as the guard approached again, a small blinking device attached to the side of the helmet. It looked electronic with a tiny antenna. I see it, Jack shouted. He dodged another swing and dashed back to the control panel. The second helmeted guard was closing in from the other side. Jack grabbed a tool from his belt, a small electromagnetic pulse generator used for resetting stubborn chip circuits. He quickly adjusted its settings to maximum power. Your Majesty, can your people withstand an electromagnetic pulse? The queen seemed to understand immediately. Yes, our nervous systems are not like yours. Jack activated the device and threw it to the center of the room. Close your eyes. A flash of energy erupted from the small device. The lights flickered, and the helmet's blocking devices sparked and died. Both guards stopped in their tracks, suddenly overwhelmed by the Queen's pheromones now that their protection was gone. Jack turned back to the control panel and finished the sequence. "It's ready, Your Majesty. The amplifiers are all yours." The Queen descended to the central platform. She placed her hands on a glowing orb that rose from the floor. Immediately, the entire room pulsed with light that spread through channels in the walls, floor, and ceiling. "Now we go to the throne room," she said, her voice stronger than before. "All palace systems are responding to my commands again." The guards and technicians in the room formed a protective circle around them as they left the chamber. In the corridors, more Vespids fell into line, their loyalty to the Queen restored now that the blocking devices had failed. They moved swiftly through the palace. Jack marveled at how the architecture seemed to come alive around them, glowing with the same blue light that emanated from the Queen's wings. "Your people really are connected to you," he said in wonder. "We are one collective," she replied. "Though perhaps after today, we will be something more." When they reached the massive doors of the throne room, the Queen paused. "General Crix will still resist. His personal device is more powerful than those of his soldiers." Jack thought for a moment. "Does it work the same way? Blocking your signals?" "Yes, but with stronger shielding." Jack smiled. "Then I have an idea." He explained quickly, and the Queen's compound eyes seemed to shine with amusement. "Very human indeed," she said. "Let us proceed." The doors swung open to reveal the throne room. Captain Hayes and the human delegation were gathered in one corner, surrounded by armed guards. At the center stood General Crix, a large Vespid with scarred chitin and dull red eyes. He wore an elaborate device across his chest and head. "My Queen," he said, his tone formal but cold. "You should have remained in your chambers." "The time for hiding is past, General," the Queen replied. She glided forward, wings spread wide. "Release the humans." Crix stood his ground. "They corrupt our ways. Their chaos threatens 5,000 years of perfect order. I do this to protect the collective." "The collective evolves," the Queen said. She moved closer, releasing more pheromones. Crix remained unaffected, protected by his device. He didn't notice Jack slipping along the wall, moving quietly behind the throne. None of the guards paid attention to the human maintenance engineer. All eyes were on the confrontation between their Queen and the rebel general. "Your rebellion ends now, General," the Queen said, her voice echoing throughout the throne room. "I have reactivated all pheromone channels in the palace." General Crix clicked his mandibles in what might have been laughter. "It matters not. My device shields me from your influence. And as long as I control the human delegation, my warriors will obey me." Captain Hayes caught Jack's eye from across the room and gave a nearly imperceptible nod. She had spotted him, and although she looked confused about why her maintenance engineer was involved in alien politics, she trusted he was on their side. Behind the throne, Jack reached the palace's main power distribution node, exactly where the Queen had told him it would be. The Vespids, with their love of symmetry and central control, had built their systems to connect at this point. Jack pulled out his multi-tool and carefully removed the access panel. Inside was a complex array of crystalline structures that hummed with energy. The Queen had explained that Crix's blocking device needed to maintain a specific frequency to work. If Jack could disrupt that frequency for just a moment. "The humans bring change, Crix," the Queen continued, keeping the general's attention. "Change is not always destruction. Sometimes it is growth." 5,000 years of perfect order," Crix responded. 5,000 years of strength through unity and purpose. Would you throw that away for the chaos these creatures represent? Jack identified the main power crystal and carefully adjusted his tool. He would get only one chance at this. "Not throw away," the Queen said. "Build upon. Evolve. Even now, Crix, do you not see? A human has done what none of our warriors could do. He adapted. He found solutions where we saw only problems. Crix's eyes narrowed. What human? What are you talking about? Jack pressed his tool against the crystal and activated it. A pulse of energy surged through the palace systems, causing the lights to flicker. For just 1 second, every electronic device in the room faltered, including General Crix's blocking device. In that moment, the Queen released the most powerful burst of pheromones she could produce. The wave hit Crix before his device could reactivate. The general dropped to his knees, his body responding to the overwhelming command of his Queen, even as his mind fought against it. Now, Jack, the Queen called. Jack leaped from behind the throne and raced toward Crix. With precise movements, he located the small control unit on the general's device and disabled it permanently. The rebel guards looked around in confusion as the Queen's influence flooded their minds once again. One by one, they lowered their weapons. "Release the humans," the Queen ordered, and the guards stepped away from the delegation. Captain Hayes approached cautiously. "Your Majesty, I believe we have much to discuss." She glanced at Jack with a mixture of pride and exasperation. "And I see my maintenance engineer has been busy." 3 days later, Jack stood on a balcony overlooking the Vespid capital city. The view was breathtaking. Crystalline towers that caught the light of the twin suns, creating rainbows that danced across the landscape. "It is beautiful, is it not?" The Queen moved to stand beside him. "Incredible," Jack agreed. "Thank you for letting me see it." "It is I who should thank you, Jack. Your actions have changed our society forever." She gestured to the city below. "Already, my people begin to adapt. Small changes, more flexibility in roles, more questions being asked. Is that good or bad? It is different, but needed, I think." She turned to him. "Captain Hayes has appointed you as the official human liaison to my court. Will you accept?" Jack smiled. "I'd be honored, Your Majesty, though I'm still just a maintenance engineer." "You are far more than that, Jack. You have shown us that sometimes the most important repairs are not to machines, but to ways of thinking." In orbit above the planet, representatives from 12 alien species watched the news broadcasts from the Vespid homeworld. The unprecedented alliance between humans and Vespids had sent shockwaves throughout the galactic community. "How did they do it?" asked a Diraxian ambassador. "The Vespids have rejected all alliance attempts for centuries." An older alien, scales showing his age, shook his head in wonder. "It is the humans. They are unpredictable, dangerous." Another asked. "Perhaps." The old alien watched as the broadcast showed Jack and the Queen addressing both their peoples. "But also fascinating. They adapt, they change, and somehow they change us too." On the planet below, Jack looked out at the new future he had helped create, all because he had taken a wrong turn looking for an air recycler.